This is the IRS rule that lets you tap your 401k at 55 without paying the 10% early withdrawal penalty. And most people who try to use it accidentally trigger the exact penalty they were trying to avoid in the first place. It is called the Rule of 55. And by the end of this video, you're going to know exactly how it works, who actually qualifies, and the 7 mistakes that quietly wreck people's early retirement plans. Stick around, because mistake number 4 is the one almost nobody sees coming. Let us start with what the Rule of 55 actually means, because a lot of bad information floats around about this one, tucked inside the Internal Revenue Code at Section 72, 2AV. The rule says something pretty simple in plain English. Separate from your job during or after the calendar year you turn 55, and you can pull money out of that employer's 401k or 403b without paying the 10% early withdrawal penalty that normally applies before age 59 and a half. That is the whole magic trick, with no penalty attached. You still owe regular income tax on every dollar you withdraw, and the plan will withhold 20% up front for federal taxes, but the 10% punishment for being too young disappears completely. One detail worth knowing is that this rule has been on the books since the Tax Reform Act of 1986, which means it isn't new, it isn't a loophole, and it isn't aggressive tax planning. Congress wrote this statute nearly 40 years ago, and it is still sitting there waiting for people who know how to use it. Now, who is this actually built for? According to the 2024 EBRI Retirement Confidence Survey, the median retirement age in this country is 62, and roughly 7 out of 10 retirees report retiring earlier than 65. If you are watching this in your 40s or 50s thinking early retirement is some fantasy, the data tells a very different story, because retiring early isn't the exception, it is the norm. The hard part isn't deciding to retire early. The hard part is bridging the gap between when you stop working and when you can touch your retirement money without getting penalized, and that is the gap the Rule of 55 was built to close. Here is how it plays out in practice. Picture turning 55 this year, getting laid off in March, or quitting, or simply deciding you're done. The reason doesn't matter, because the IRS doesn't care whether the separation was voluntary, involuntary, retirement, or termination. As long as you separate from that employer during or after the calendar year, you turn 55. The 401k sitting at that employer becomes accessible, penalty-free. Public safety employees get an even better deal. Police officers, firefighters, EMTs, federal corrections officers, customs and border protection officers, federal law enforcement officers, air traffic controllers, and private sector firefighters all get the age dropped to 50. That break is written directly into IRC Section 72T10 and Secure Act 2.0. The law Congress passed in December 2022 explicitly added private sector firefighters to that list. Okay, that is the rule. This is where people destroy themselves. Mistake number 1, and this is the big one, comes down to rolling your 401k into an IRA before you take the withdrawal. The moment that money lands inside an IRA, the Rule of 55 vanishes completely, and the 10% penalty snaps right back into place. Michael Rusinak, VP of Fidelity Financial Solutions, put it bluntly when he stated, quote, rollover ERAs from 401k are not included in this rule, and withdrawals could incur a penalty, end quote. Every financial advisor you've ever talked to has probably told you to roll your 401k into an IRA when you leave a job. For most people, that is perfectly fine advice. For someone planning to retire between 55 and 59 and a half, it is catastrophic. And the fix is simple, which is to leave the money inside the 401k. Mistake number 2 involves leaving your job too early. The rule is keyed to the calendar year you turn 55, which means walking away at 53 or even 54 locks you out, with no retroactive fix once you eventually hit 55. There is a flip side, though, and this is the lesser-known calendar year quirk. A 55th birthday in December still lets you leave the job in January of that same year, 11 months before your birthday, and qualify for the rule. Because the IRS looks at the calendar year, not the date. Mistake number 3 assumes this works on any 401k you own, and it does too. The rule only applies to the plan with the employer you just left, which means an old 401k from a job you held at 42 stays locked up until 59 and a half, unless you do something clever first. Bankrate points out the clever move, which is rolling your old 401k accounts and even your IRS into your current employer's plan before you quit, assuming that plan accepts rollovers. All of that money then falls under the Rule of 55 umbrella when you separate. Mistake number 4 is the one nobody sees coming. Your 401k plan might force you to take the entire balance as a single lump sum because many plans simply don't allow partial withdrawals for separated employees. Picture finally pulling the trigger, retiring at 55. And the plan hands you a check for your entire $400,000 balance, which gets added straight to your taxable income for that year and rockets you into a much higher tax bracket. The 10% penalty was waived, but you just paid more in federal taxes than the penalty would have ever cost you. That is exactly why Paul Peretta, a partner at the law firm Troutman Pepper, told Bankrate, quote, bear in mind that the only real advantage of the Rule of 55 is avoiding the 10% penalty. Meanwhile, the tax deferral is sacrificed, which may turn out to be more valuable if other financial resources that are not tax qualified can cover expenses for the coming years. End quote. Before you ever use this rule, call your plan administrator and ask one single question. Does the plan allow partial periodic withdrawals for separated participants? If the answer is no, the Rule of 55 might not be the tool you think it is. Mistake number 5 trips up the people who assume this applies to IRS. And it absolutely does not. The IRS exceptions table makes it crystal clear, listing the separation from service exception as yes for qualified plans like 401ks, and flatly no for ERAs across the board. Traditional ERA, Roth ERA, SEP, ERA, Simple ERA, none of them qualify, which means anyone with most of their retirement savings sitting inside IRS needs a completely different strategy, like a 72T SEP plan. A quick word on that, since it is the main alternative, a 72T plan, or substantially equal periodic payments, lets you tap any retirement account at any age, but you are locked into a fixed withdrawal schedule for 5 years or until you turn 59 and a half, whichever runs longer. Break that schedule, and the IRS hits you with a 10% retroactive penalty on every dollar you've already pulled out. Fidelity's example shows a single 55-year-old sitting on $500,000 would be locked into withdrawals somewhere between $11,468 and $28,152 annually. Depending on which calculation method they pick, compared to that, the rule of 55 stays wildly more flexible because you take what you want when you want from your old 401k. Mistake number 6 is forgetting that being eligible doesn't automatically make it smart. Look at the actual numbers. According to Vanguard's 2024, How America Saves Data, the average 401k balance for workers aged 55 to 64 sits at $271,320, while the median lands at just $95,642. That median figure is the one that really matters, because averages get inflated by a handful of very wealthy savers at the top. If you got around $95,000 saved and you start drawing it down at 55, stretching that across 30-plus years of retirement becomes a serious problem, which means the 10% penalty is the threat. Running out of money is the threat. Mistake number 7 involves the automatic rollover trap. Smaller 401k balances can get automatically rolled into an IRA by your employer once you separate. And the moment that happens, the rule of 55 disappears. Even though you never chose to give it up, anyone with the balance on the lower end needs to talk to HR before walking out the door, just to make sure they're not about to get force-rolled out of their best option. Let's pull all of this together. The rule of 55 is exactly what it claims to be: a clean and legal way to access your 401k or 403b starting in the calendar year you turn 55, or age 50 if you are in public safety, without paying the 10% early withdrawal penalty. Law since 1986. This is a loophole. It is aggressive tax planning. It is simply a statute that has been waiting on the books for almost 4 decades. The rule is also narrow, which is what trips most people up. It only applies to the plan with the employer it doesn't cover IRS. It doesn't help if you leave too early. Your plan's withdrawal rules can block it entirely, and one careless rollover can quietly destroy the whole thing. For the right person, someone separating from a job in their late 50s with most of their savings parked inside their current employer's 401k and a plan that allows flexible withdrawals, the rule of 55 becomes one of the most powerful early retirement tools the IRS has ever written into the tax code. For the wrong person, it turns into a fast way to wreck a retirement that took 30 years to build. If you are somewhere in that window between 45 and 65, and this is something you are actually planning around, do 2 things this week. Pull up your plan summary, plan description, and find the section covering withdrawals after separation. Then, before you sign any rollover paperwork at all, make sure the person handing you that form knows you are planning to use the rule of 55. Once that money moves, you can't move it back. That is the rule of 55. That is how it actually works. And now you know what most people get wrong about it.